So a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, sent me, I'm not quite sure about its source, but she sent me this quote. Some of you are aware I have an opinion on the dreadful situation in Gaza that is not shared by the BBC or the Times. This fellow, French journalist Brice Couturier, parenthesis, now found out he may have just translated it, end parenthesis, has set it out far better than I ever could, and coldly explains the absolute and utter horror of Gaza and its future. It's chilling reading. Then we have the translation, Mr. Brice. Israel cannot win this war because it wasn't not designed to be won, not because it is militarily outmatched, but because it is caught in an equation deliberately made insoluble. On October the 7th, by massacring civilians and abducting hundreds of hostages, Hamas triggered a war with no bearable outcome. Israel was not only surprised, it was trapped. It is important to understand Hamas is not seeking victory, it seeks the destruction of Israel. They do not care if Gaza burns as long as Israel bleeds. This is an eschatological strategy. Lose everything as long as the other falls with you. And their strategy relies on entanglement, on emotion, on manipulating Western consciences. Their strength is not military, it is dramaturgical, and perhaps the most chilling thing is this: they have understood the West better than many Israeli strategists. Their real front is Western public opinion, not the IDF. By taking hostages, they forbid peace. By hiding among civilians in the most densely populated territory in the world, they forbid war. Hamas has invented a geometry of the trap. Israel is locked in a war where every victory is a loss. In this asymmetrical postmodern war, it is not reality that counts, it is the image of reality. This trap could not work without the involuntary cooperation of the Western democracies. By reversing the pressure, not on the hostage takers, but on those trying to rescue them, they legitimize blackmail. By recognizing a Palestinian state unconditionally, they turn a terrorist strategy into political capital. Let's be clear, a ceasefire accompanied by the release of all hostages is a mirage, an illusion of Western projection. Hamas especially does not want an end. It wants the conflict to fester, for the hostages to rot underground, for the agony to last. The hostages are trophies, levers, spotlights trained on Gaza to keep the war going. They will not all be returned. That is precisely why they were taken. So only a terrible alternative remains. Either Israel persists, perhaps for years, occupies Gaza down to the last tunnel at the cost of countless deaths, diplomatic disaster, and with no certainty of success, or it withdraws, quietly accepting that another October the 7th is already in gestation. It is no longer about winning, but about choosing the form of one's defeat or of a half victory, say the optimists. Some claim, in Clausewitzian logic, that a war once begun must be carried through to the end, otherwise it will return worse. Others believe that an incomplete victory is better than a total disaster. I repeat, the most tragic part is that Hamas' strategy has worked, and it works because we let it work. Hamas has understood, in a world governed by images, terrorism pays, provided it is well staged. Now, end quote. That's his deal. And it's articulate. That is the argument, well articulated, and I thank him for that, and it's tosh. I wish I could confront this man, Brice, personally. It might end up in fisticuffs, but I can't, so this is my take on what he wrote. The Western world, self-named, spoken with pride, the first world, or what Bernie Sanders cumbersomely and I hope unconsciously calls all the important countries, simply cannot acknowledge that nobody likes to be occupied. Occupation is a war crime, and its victims don't respond well to the inevitable apartheid the Christian white European powers have assumed, sometimes paternally, always sadistically, biblically, and always supremacist, as their right. Was the IRA being theatrical? Were the Sicarii in 70 AD Jerusalem being theatrical? Or 117 AD Cyrene? Was Boudica being theatrical? Crazy Horse, Nat Turner, etc., etc., ad infinitum. The iteration, do you condemn Hamas, do you condemn Hamas, should be answered with, do you condemn apartheid? We used to. Remember? Denying it, apartheid, would be honest. This Frenchman seems to assume it is a natural state. Europe über alles. Shall I call Nelson Mandela, Jimmy Carter, Miko Peled, Norman Finkelstein, Ilan Pape, Francesca Albanese, Gabor Mate, etc., etc., manipulated? It is laughable. Bobby Sands, Huey Newton, Red Cloud, Pontiac, Ho Chi Minh might all have been blazing narcissists. I did not know them, but I know this: white supremacist is. Zionist Israel is a messianic, imaginative creation like the promised land, manifest destiny made of the Americas. It might have been negotiated into existence in 48. It wasn't. It was forced upon the region by a coalition of states well used to forcing themselves upon any region they pleased. The Americas, Australasia, India, and Sub-Saharan Africa. That this kind of peevish supremacist take is even published reveals the delusion of the West and this French dish rag. So that's all I've written, and I'm not grateful, but I appreciate sometimes these very articulate statements of the other side. And my side, I have to say, is just not that. It is the absence of that. It is the absence of, I have been inspired for my whole life by this gleaming city on a hill. I don't operate that way, right? For somebody to say, which is totally valid, to speak about the horrors of Islamic terrorism over the past nearly 35 years, however long it's been going on. Absolutely. That's, again, I'm not a pro any monotheism and their fallouts. However, they are children compared to Christianity. They are young indeed, as Macbeth would say. They've just gotten started to catch up. And but it's been the currency of Christianity and the pagan system that incorporated Christianity, the Roman imperial state, which for some reason, some very suspicious reason, the British, the Elizabethans particularly, and then the founding fathers of the Americas were very keen on. They created their sense of justice out of the writings of the famous Romans, Cicero and Cato and all that sort of lot, some of which I've read. And within the context, they are as valid as Stefanik, and they're as valid as this Couturier chap. They're all within their own context. Now, if I take the position of a Gaulish chieftain or a Gaulish, doesn't matter, blacksmith, I don't really care. If I take his position, which is the position I do take, that's where I start from. I say to you, you're clear, articulate, it's good to know what you think, but you're evil. And you're evil because you've decided that you're the one who can define evil. Absence.